Snow came early that year, drifting past the weaver's mailbox in slow, lazy spirals. Their house sat at the edge of town, one of those places realtors described as quiet, which was usually just code for lonely. On the evening before Christmas Eve, Mr. Weaver stepped out to take the trash, grumbling about raccoons, when he froze mid-stride. There he was again. A tall figure stood at the end of their driveway, half lit by the soft orange glow of the street lamp. Same old-fashioned tailcoat, same perfectly pressed trousers, same black top hat dusted in frost. He looked like a walking postcard from the 1800s, except for the part that always made Mr. Weaver's stomach twist. He didn't blink, and he didn't look away. The man's eyes, pale, almost silvery, were fixed on the windows of the Weaver home. His mouth opened, releasing a single trembling melody. It wasn't a familiar Christmas carol, not exactly, more like the tune you'd hear in a snow globe that hasn't been wound in decades. Thin, fragile notes drifted through the cold air like spider silk. Inside, the dog began whining. Mrs. Weaver peeked through the blinds. "Again?" she whispered. Every year, same night, same hour, same song. And every year, no matter what they yelled at him, no matter how close Mr. Weaver got with the flashlight, shouting that he'd call the sheriff, the man never moved, never flinched, never blinked. This time, though, something was different. When their son Elijah pressed his forehead to the window, the tune faltered, just for a second. Then the singer tilted his head, slowly, smoothly, and the melody twisted, as if reshaped around a new rhythm, around Elijah. The boy backed away, goosebumps rising on his arms. "Dad, I think he's singing to me." No one slept much that night, and in the morning the snow outside the weaver's door held a set of footprints leading toward the house, but none leading away. The next morning felt strangely hollow, like the house itself hadn't slept. The Weavers went about their routines, coffee brewing, boots thudding on hard wood, the radio murmuring some cheerful holiday talk, but everything seemed off-tempo. Elijah kept scanning the frost-fogged windows. Every few minutes he'd glance back toward the end of the driveway, expecting the singer to still be there. By noon, Mrs. Weaver decided they needed answers. She drove Elijah into town the way a person drives toward a doctor's office while already bracing for bad news. The town library sat crammed between an antique store and a diner permanently smelling of burnt bacon. Its caretaker, Mrs. Lynn, had been around long enough that no one actually remembered when she started working there. She squinted at the description of the man in the coat. Old-fashioned dress? Top hat? Singing? Her voice was flat, almost bored, but her hands trembled as she sorted the return cart. Elijah noticed. "We see him every year," he said quietly. "Do you know who he is?" Mrs. Lynn pressed her lips together, as if stories weren't meant to be dug up, especially not by children. Mrs. Weaver bristled. "We just want to know if this is some local tradition, or if someone is—" "Tradition?" Mrs. Lynn barked a laugh that belonged in a different body, shaky, nervous. "No, it's not a tradition. It's a visitation." She turned toward a locked cabinet behind her desk. The key around her neck rattled as she opened it and pulled out a leather-bound folder labeled simply Winter Incidents. She didn't hand it over. Instead, she opened to a yellowed page and tapped a photo. A grainy black-and-white image of the town's main street covered in snow. Standing among the horse-drawn carriages was the unmistakable silhouette of a tall man in a tailcoat and top hat, eyes fixed directly at the camera. "He's been seen before," Mrs. Lynn whispered. "Always days before Christmas. Always by the same family, no matter how many times the house was sold." "But why us?" Elia asked. Mrs. Lynn closed the folder sharply, as if the photo might pull itself out. "Best you go home before dark. He always comes before dark." As the Weavers stepped out into the icy air, Elia felt the weight of the town pressing in on him. Its boarded-up histories, its unspoken warnings, its people who looked away just a little too quickly. If the singer came every year, if he came to the same house, then he wasn't wandering. He was following a path, and it led straight to them. That evening, the Weavers tried to act normal. Lights on, TV humming, dinner simmering on the stove, but every sound felt like a countdown. Ilya sat at the dining table with homework open in front of him, pencil unmoving. The melody from the night before kept looping inside his head, curling around his thoughts like frost creeping over a window. Around 7, the doorbell rang. Mr. Weaver flinched so hard he knocked over his glass of iced tea. But it wasn't the singer. It was Mr. Rowland, the high school music teacher who lived 2 streets over. He held a clipboard and wore a scarf several decades out of style, like someone who never updated his wardrobe after college. "Your boy missed rehearsal last week. I wanted to drop off the winter performance schedule." He stepped inside after Mrs. Weaver insisted, and as he warmed his hands near the vent, he noticed Ilya staring blankly at the table. "You look pale, kid. Everything all right?" Ilya hesitated, then hummed the tune. Just a few bars, thin, off-key, faltering. But it was enough. Mr. Rowland froze. His face drained of all color. The clipboard slipped from his hands and clattered onto the floor. "Where did you hear that?" he whispered. Mrs. Weaver frowned. "A man outside our house? Some kind of singer?" Mr. Rowland shook his head slowly, violently even, as if trying to fling something out of his brain. "That's not a Christmas melody. It's not a holiday tune at all. It's—" He stopped himself. "It's what?" Mr. Weaver demanded. Mr. Rowland swallowed hard. "It's part of an old Appalachian dirge. Pre-colonial, actually. Not written, passed down. A mourning song." Ilya's stomach flipped. But the man was alive. Mr. Rowland stepped closer to him, voice shaking. "Tell me, when he sang, did he look at you?" Ilya nodded slowly. Mr. Rowland stumbled back like he'd been shoved. "He's not singing to you. He's singing for you. That tune is meant to bind itself to just one person at a time." The house fell silent. Even the dog stopped pacing. Mrs. Weaver finally found her voice. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, whispering now, "that whoever he's calling has already been chosen, long before any of you were born." He grabbed his scarf, backing toward the door. "Lock your windows tonight. He won't break them. He won't force anything. He doesn't have to." Mr. Weaver followed him out onto the porch. Do you know what he is?" Mr. Rowland paused at the bottom step, snow crunching under his shoes. "I know what he's not," he said, without turning back. "He's not human, and he won't leave until the one he's calling opens the door." He hurried down the street, disappearing into the orange glow of the street lamps. Inside, the melody still echoed softly in Ilya's head, only now it no longer sounded like a song. It sounded like an invitation.
The storm rolled in just after midnight, rattling the windows like impatient fingertips. The Weavers had locked everything: doors, windows, even the old crawl-space hatch in the hallway, but no one felt safer for it. Mr. Weaver paced the living room, occasionally glancing through the blinds, even though he promised he wouldn't. Mrs. Weaver sat with her arms wrapped around herself, replaying Mr. Rowland's words in her mind. And upstairs, unable to sleep, Ilya kept hearing faint threads of the melody drifting through the wind. It wasn't really there, he knew that, but his mind kept shaping the howl of the storm into that same fragile tune. By 2 in the morning, everyone had given up on sleep. The power flickered twice. The house groaned under the weight of icy wind. And that's when they heard it. A soft thump inside the walls. Not outside. Not on the roof. Inside. Mr. Weaver grabbed a flashlight. Probably a squirrel nest, or something fell. But the thumps came again, steady, deliberate, like footsteps shuffling along the other side of the drywall. The sound traveled from the hallway toward the living room, then stopped abruptly behind the old bookshelf that came with the house when they bought it. Mrs. Weaver whispered, "Move it." Mr. Weaver hesitated, then braced himself and dragged the bookshelf aside. A puff of dusk exploded into the air. Behind it, half hidden by yellowed wallpaper, was a panel in the wall, a warped wooden square with a small iron handle. "This wasn't in the inspection report," Mr. Weaver muttered. He pulled it open. Inside was a narrow cavity filled with brittle paper, bundled and tied with string. 10, maybe 12 old envelopes, packed tightly as though someone had shoved them all at once. The dates were smudged but visible. 1911, 1924, 1949, 1950, 1951, and then decades with no gaps, families coming and going, lives unfolding, letters accumulating. Ilya tugged one free and carefully unfolded it. December 23rd, 1911. He's returned again. Same coat, same hat, same song. He stands in the snow and looks only at our Henry. We told the boy to ignore the melody, but he says it plays inside his dreams. We must leave before Christmas morning. If anyone finds this, do not open your door to him, no matter how sweetly he sings. The second letter, dated 1924. We made the mistake of speaking to him, not with words, just a look through the window. That was enough. After that, he watched only our youngest daughter. When she went missing, the sheriff searched for weeks, but there were no footprints leading away, only toward the house. Another letter from 1951. He does not age, he does not blink, and he is not calling the living. He is calling something that belongs to him. The Weavers read in frozen silence, each letter colder than the last. When Ilya picked up the final envelope, it was different, smaller, sealed with wax, no date, no signature, just a single line written in trembling ink on the front. For the next family, He chooses the child who dreams in his tune. Mrs. Weaver's breath caught. Ilya, have you dreamed about him? Ilya didn't answer right away, but his silence was enough. Mr. Weaver fumbled for his phone. I'm calling the sheriff. Before he could dial, the house lights flickered again, then went out completely. For a heartbeat, the entire house was silent. Then, through the thick storm, a single clear note drifted from outside. It was the beginning of that same old melody. And this time, it didn't sound distant at all. It sounded like the singer was standing right on the other side of the front door. The melody seeped through the front door like cold air, thin and trembling, but unmistakably clear. It wasn't the drifting, distant tune from nights before. This time it was sharp, deliberate, each note struck with the precision of a fingertip tapping on glass. Ilya felt it vibrate in his chest. Mrs. Weaver grabbed his shoulders and pulled him back from the foyer, whispering, "Don't listen! Don't you dare listen!" But the truth was written across Ilya's face. He wasn't hearing the melody. He was recognizing it. Mr. Weaver lit a candle, the only glow in the pitch-black house. The flame flickered violently each time the melody rose. "Sheriff's not picking up," he said, voice shaking. "Storm must have knocked out the whole line." Another note curled through the doorframe, then another, higher, elongated, bending slightly as though testing the air. And then, impossibly, the song shifted. It formed syllables, not words, but the shape of words, like someone trying to imitate human language without lungs or breath. Ah. Mrs. Weaver clamped her hand over her mouth. "He's saying his name." The dog began barking frantically, then whimpered and crawled under the couch. The floorboards trembled as the melody lengthened into a low hum, vibrating through the wood like something pressing its ear against the house. "Ah, Mr. Weaver snapped. "Enough! I'm ending this!" He stormed toward the door, fumbling with the deadbolt, but before he reached it, the humming stopped. The sudden silence was louder than the storm. Then, 3 slow, deliberate taps on the door. Not pounding, not scratching, just a polite knock, as if a gentleman were waiting patiently to be invited in. Tap, tap, tap. Ilya shuddered. "He wants me." "No," Mrs. Weaver pulled him close. "He wants something through you, something he thinks you carry." Mr. Weaver raised his voice at the door. "Go away! You hear me? Leave my family alone!" The house answered with another 3 taps, softer this time, almost tender. Mrs. Weaver grabbed the bundle of old letters from the wall cavity and flipped through them desperately. "There has to be something, some way they stopped him, something someone wrote." But page after page held nothing but warnings, regrets, and goodbyes. No instructions, no solutions, only fear. Suddenly, Ilya gasped. The letter said he picks the child who dreams the melody." Mrs. Weaver turned to him, terrified. "Did you dream it? You have to tell us." Ilya nodded slowly, but then he added something he hadn't told anyone yet. "I didn't just dream the song. I dreamed him," he whispered. Mrs. Weaver's voice broke. "What did you say?" Ilya swallowed hard. "He wasn't outside. He was
inside the house, standing right at my bedside, just watching. And in the dream, he didn't look like a man at all." The wind howled against the shutters. Mr. Weaver clenched his fists. "What did he look like?" Ilya shook his head. "Not like anything that should exist." Another knock. This time, the candle went out. And in the darkness, the singer's voice slid through the keyhole, thin as a breath. "Ilya, open." The weavers froze, because that last word, that whisper, was unmistakably human. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the house wrapped in a cold, brittle quiet. The weavers hadn't slept, not really, just drifted in and out of tense, exhausted dazes. When the power finally blinked back on, the first thing Mr. Weaver did was check the outdoor security cameras. He pulled the feed up on the living room TV, while Mrs. Weaver held Ilya close on the couch. All three of them leaned forward as the footage loaded. At first, the screen showed only swirling snow and the empty driveway. Midnight. Then 12:05. Then 12:10. And then he appeared. The singer stepped into view as though peeling himself out of the darkness. No footsteps leading up, no motion blur. One moment he wasn't there, the next he simply was. He tilted his head slightly toward the camera. Not enough to be human curiosity, more like he knew he was being watched. But something was off. Mr. Weaver squinted. Why isn't his mouth moving? Because it wasn't. In the footage, the singer stood perfectly still, while the audio track registered faint traces of his melody in the background. Notes appeared without his lips so much as twitching. Mrs. Weaver covered her mouth. "It's like the song isn't coming from him at all." At 12:17, he lifted one arm, the first movement he made, and reached toward the house. Not touching, not knocking, just feeling the air. Searching. And then he turned fully toward the camera. For the first time, they saw his eyes up close. Not pale, not silvery, empty, like two holes burned into a photograph. Ilya whimpered, "That's not his real face." The camera glitched, flickering with static. When the image stabilized, the singer was suddenly inches closer to the lens, hat tilted forward, coat billowing though there was no wind. And then, frame by frame, he leaned in, as if trying to peer through the screen and into the living room. Mrs. Weaver shut off the TV with shaking fingers. "We're not watching any more! We're not!" But even with the screen dark, Ilya whispered, he wasn't looking into the camera. His parent turned to him, dread blooming across their faces. He was looking past it, like he could see inside the house. And somewhere outside, far down the street, a single faint note drifted through the crisp morning air. The melody wasn't finished with them yet. By late afternoon, the sky dimmed into a dull iron gray, the kind of color that made the whole street look abandoned. The Weavers tried to keep the house bright, lamps on, curtains drawn, but the light felt thin, almost swallowed by the walls. Ilya hadn't spoken much since they watched the footage. He kept rubbing his temples, like the melody was stuck somewhere behind his eyes. Around dusk, he stood up suddenly. "I need air," he muttered. Mrs. Weaver grabbed his arm. "You're not going outside." But he wasn't heading to the door. He walked to the window and pressed his palm to the glass. The frost on it shimmered in a pattern. Thin white lines curling into shapes that looked disturbingly familiar. Music notation. In frost. Small, uneven bars, a drifting melody sketched by the cold. Mr. Weaver cursed under his breath. "He's playing with us." Ilya wasn't listening. He leaned in closer to the window, breath fogging the glass. "He's not trying to hurt us. He's trying to reach someone he thinks is here." Mrs. Weaver stiffened. "Not again! You're not going near that door!" But he stepped back from her slowly, his eyes unfocused. "I dreamed it again last night. He wasn't outside. He was standing right in the hall, like he belongs in this house." Mr. Weaver felt the temperature drop. "Ilya, what did he want?" He swallowed. "He kept pointing at the attic." A silence fell so heavy it felt physical. The attic. The one space in the house they hadn't checked. The one place the previous owners never mentioned. Before either parent could stop him, Ilya turned and started walking toward the stairs. Not fast, slow, steady, as though following instructions whispered directly into his bones. Mrs. Weaver grabbed his arm. "You're not going up there!" But he wasn't heading to the door. He walked to the window and pressed his palm to the glass. The frost on it shimmered in a pattern. Thin white lines curling into shapes that looked disturbingly familiar. Music notation. In frost. Small, uneven bars, a drifting melody sketched by the cold. Mr. Weaver cursed under his breath. "He's playing with us." Ilya wasn't listening. He leaned in closer to the window, breath fogging the glass. "He's not trying to hurt us. He's trying to reach someone he thinks is here." Mrs. Weaver stiffened. "Not again! You're not going near that door!" But Ilya stepped back from her slowly, his eyes unfocused. "I dreamed it again last night. He wasn't outside. He was standing right in the hall, like he belongs in this house." Mr. Weaver felt the temperature drop. "Ilya, what did he want?" He swallowed. "He kept pointing at the attic." And then, as if on cue, the faintest hum drifted down through the ceiling boards. The melody, soft, close, and impossibly, undeniably, inside.
They stood beneath the attic door, staring up at the square outline in the ceiling like it was a mouth that might open on its own. The humming from above was faint but clear, thin as a thread, steady as a heartbeat, not loud enough to be human, not mechanical, something older, something patient. Mrs. Weaver gripped Ilya's shoulders firmly. "You're not going up there. Do you hear me? Whatever's making that sound is not—" But the attic hatch suddenly creaked, not fully opening, just lifting a fraction of an inch, enough for a thin draft of icy air to whisper down across their faces. Ilya shivered. "He opened it for us." "No," Mr. Weaver said sharply. "I'm ending this right now." He fetched a chair and a flashlight. Mrs. Weaver tried to stop him, but he was already climbing up, pushing the hatch carefully. The moment he raised it, the humming stopped. Not faded, not drifted away, stopped like someone had pressed a mute button. Mrs. Weaver called up nervously, "What do you see?" Mr. Weaver clicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through swirling dust, revealing nothing. Just insulation, old trunks, a few boxes, a deflated holiday wreath,
The usual clutter of a house with too many forgotten corners. No footprints, no intruder, no indication anyone or anything had been there at all. But then the light caught something in the far corner. A small wooden box. Old, dark, carved with looping patterns that looked eerily like the frost melody from the window. The box was no bigger than a lunch pail, but it had a presence, like it was waiting. Mr. Weaver knelt and touched it. The moment his fingers brushed the lid, a cold burst of breath swept through the attic, like someone exhaling right beside him. He jerked back. Mrs. Weaver's voice trembled from below. "What happened?" Mr. Weaver didn't answer right away. He lifted the wooden box and climbed down, shutting the attic hatch firmly. When he placed the box on the hallway floor, they all stared at it. No hinges, no latch, no obvious way to open it. Just strange carved lines curling over its surface. Ilya knelt slowly, almost drawn to it. "I've seen this before." "No, you haven't." "I have," he whispered. "In my dreams, he was holding it." Mr. Weaver stepped between his family and the box. "Nobody touches anything until we know what this is." But before he could move it, the box made a soft clicking sound, like something inside had shifted. Then a second click. Then a third, faster this time, as if reacting to their presence. The carvings on the lid seemed to shimmer in the dim light, casting rippling shadows on the walls. Mrs. Weaver grabbed Ilya's hand. "We have to leave, right now." But the house groaned, wood contracting in a long, low creak. And from outside, from the direction of the snowy front yard, the melody began again. Not soft, not distant, loud, as if the singer was standing right outside the door, and the box had just told him they'd found it.
The melody outside grew sharper, louder, vibrating through the walls like a pulse the house couldn't contain. The front door shuddered lightly with each note, as if something on the other side was tapping along in perfect rhythm. Ilya clutched his mother's sleeve. "He knows we found the box. He was waiting for it." Mr. Weaver cursed under his breath and reached for the wooden box again, intending to shove it into the basement or bury it under something heavy. But the moment his hands touched it, the carvings on the lid glowed faintly. No light, no color, just a kind of shifting, pale shimmer like moonlight on ice. Then the lid lifted on its own. Just a crack. A cold gust spilled out, colder than the storm outside, colder than anything that belonged in a house. Mrs. Weaver yanked Ilya back behind her as Mr. Weaver staggered, dropping the box. It hit the floor with a dull thud. The lid swung fully open. Inside was not an object, not a toy, not a relic, but a small folded scrap of cloth, dark blue, frayed edges, embroidered with silver thread. It looked like part of a child's winter coat from another century. Ilya inhaled sharply. "That's his! That's what he's been calling!" But before anyone could respond, the cloth unfurled on its own, and beneath it was something else. A photograph. Old, sepia-toned, edges burned. It showed a family standing in front of the very same house, long coats, somber faces, snowy yard. At the center was a small boy in a blue coat. He looked exactly like Ilya. Mrs. Weaver froze. Mr. Weaver stepped back so fast he nearly tripped. Impossible, but there he was, the same eyes, same expression, same face. Ilya whispered, voice trembling, "It's not me, it's someone he lost." The melody outside stopped abruptly. Silence.
Then 3 slow, heavy knocks on the door, nothing polite this time. Boom, boom, boom. The final knock shook the floor. The lights flickered, the house groaned, and the photograph in the box curled inward, edges darkening as if reacting to the singer's presence. Mr. Weaver grabbed the box, slamming the lid shut, but the humming started again, now inside the house. Not from the attic, not from the walls, from the front door. Mrs. Weaver's voice cracked. "He's not calling someone out anymore. He's calling someone in." Ilya stared at the box, torn between fear and something deeper, an aching familiarity. "He wants the boy from the photograph. He thinks I'm him." Another knock, this one softer, almost tender. And then a whisper seeped through the doorframe. "Home."
The final whisper, thin as frost, hung in the air. "Home." The Weavers stood frozen in the dim hallway, the unopened box clutched in Mr. Weaver's shaking hands. Outside, the snow had gone unnaturally still. No wind, no movement, just a heavy quiet waiting for a decision. Another knock came, but this time it wasn't loud nor forceful. It was soft, gentle, almost pleading. Mrs. Weaver's voice trembled. "He thinks you're the boy from the photograph, the one who never made it home." "I'm not him," Ilya whispered, though he wasn't sure whom he was trying to convince. Mr. Weaver straightened, jaw clenched. "We're not opening that door. I don't care what he wants. We are not surrendering our son." He backed toward the living room with the box, intending to burn it, bury it, anything. The moment he stepped away, the house creaked sharply, as if shifting weight. And then all the windows in the house fogged over at once. Every single pane. Thick white frost spiraled across the glass in swirls that formed the same melody marks from the attic carving. Ilya felt something tug, not physically, not violently, just a pull inside his chest, like a memory he didn't know he had. "He's not trying to take me," he said quietly. "He's trying to correct something." Mrs. Weaver pulled him close. "You are ours. Whatever he wants to correct, he can't." Outside, the singer began humming again. But it wasn't the haunting funeral melody. It had shifted into something slower, softer, sorrowful. A lullaby. Ilya blinked hard. "He's not angry." Mr. Weaver slammed the box onto the table. "I'm ending this." He pried the lid open and grabbed the photograph inside. The edges were curling inward, the boy's face nearly fading under some creeping sepia blur. And then the photograph split, right down the center. Not torn, split by itself. 2 identical faces peeled apart like pressed flowers, one drifting upward, dissolving into frost, the other falling into Mr. Weaver's hands. The boy in the second photo was not identical to Ilya anymore. Same coat, same stance, same era, but the face had changed. Sharper chin, different eyes, similar, but no longer a mirror, as if the photograph had corrected itself. The humming outside stopped. Then footsteps, slow, fading, moving away from the door, away from the house, into the snow. Mrs. Weaver rushed to the window and pulled aside the curtain in a single terrified motion. The singer was walking down the street. For the first time in decades, maybe a century, He wasn't facing the house. He wasn't staring through the windows. He wasn't singing. He was leaving. And as he walked, his tall figure dissolved into drifting flakes. Coat, hat, hair, limbs, like he'd been carved from frost all along. By the time he reached the corner of the street, nothing remained but the faint impression of footprints filling with snow. Ilya stepped closer to the window. "He found the one he was calling," he whispered, "and it wasn't me." Mrs. Weaver hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe. Mr. Weaver held the corrected photograph like it was a living thing. They stayed like that for a long time, until the snow turned golden with sunrise. Only one thing remained unexplained. 3 days later, a new family moved into a house across town. They had a young son, quiet, pale, wearing a thrifted winter coat that seemed too old-fashioned for him. When he walked past the Weaver's home that first morning, he paused, just for a second, just long enough to tilt his head, as if listening to a melody only he could hear.